This short video is going to cover how we build scorecards manually in Scoreboard. First, I'm going to show you some scorecards that have already been built, so you'll have an idea of why we build a scorecard in the way that we do, in an empty database. So I'm in a demo database, and I have several different kinds of scorecards. Let's take a look at Safety, Quality, Reliability Scorecard, a typical manufacturing performance scorecard. When you look at this scorecard, you can see that we have several key performance areas. We have quality, cost, safety, productivity, and people. We also, within these areas, have several objectives, which are scored by how we perform in our measures. We have other kinds of scorecard, for instance a P&L scorecard, where we don't have objectives. The P&L scorecard is naturally divided into key performance areas: income, expenses, other income, and total income. And then we simply have the measures under that scorecard. In other scorecards, like the Sales Rep Monthly Performance Scorecard, we simply have the name of the scorecard, the names of the sales representatives, and their production per month. So we have many different kinds of scorecards, and it's important to understand how they're structured when we start to build them manually. So we'll go to Scoreboard and we'll log in. You'll have already created your calendars, and when you log in there's nothing else in the application. Start by clicking on the upper left-hand section here to choose the module in which to work. So we're going to work in Scorecards. As you can see, we have no organisation structure. When we create an organisation structure, it's typically a mirror of your organisation map. So we'll start a new organisation and we'll call it Executive Team. Under the executive team, we're going to have their departments, which we can add by right-clicking and choosing New Organisation. So we'll have manufacturing, sales, and marketing. And within each of these areas, we may have other subordinate areas, which again we add by right-clicking and choosing New Organisation. So let's add First Shift, and Second Shift. Once we've created an organisation structure, we can manually create a scorecard. So let's select Executive Team and New Scorecard. This one we're going to call Financial Performance. The scorecard name is like the name of a workbook in Excel, or the file name if you don't have multiple workbooks. Once we have our scorecard name, we now need to choose our structure, and this is based on how the scorecard is built. If all you have are measures and KPIs, you simply select New KPI over and over again, and this will create a scorecard like the Sales Rep scorecard I showed you earlier. If you have key performance areas, it works slightly differently. Let's say for now you have one called Income or Revenue, and that you want to make a scorecard from a profit or loss statement. In this case, we're not going to have a new objective or a new subordinate area, we're just going to have new KPIs. So I'm going to call this one Monthly Sales Income. The calendar you select here represents the frequency at which you want to record the data. I can add a description if I want as well, which will show up as a hover over. The next section is very important. It's how your KPIs are scored. How do you establish the normalized score? What we're doing is the same thing that schools do when they establish a grade point average. We begin by taking different kinds of measurements, say percentages, dollars, or ratios, and based upon target values, we establish a score between 0 and 10. This gives us the ability to roll up a weighted average score for our key performance areas, our objectives, or our subordinate areas. Each one of these gauges is a different way to normalise your score. So, for example, if you have a measure that is yes-no, the score is either going to be 0 or 10. If it's goal only, you either make the goal or you don't. So the score again is either going to be 0 or 10. A two-colour gauge tells us that there are 3 thresholds that we've established to score at. If I'm at this measurement, my score is 0. Here it's 5. And here it's 10. Goal red flag is the classic scoring methodology that's been used for the last 2 decades or so. You start by establishing a value where everything is good, and that's where the gauge turns green, and this value is given a score of 6.66. You then establish a value where the gauge turns red, and this is given a score of 3.33. The application then takes the difference between these two values and adds it onto either side, so now we have a minimum score of 0 and a maximum score of 10. And for all of the other kinds of gauges, you establish all of the thresholds yourself. So once we've chosen what kind of gauge we want, we move on, and it's time to actually enter the values for your thresholds, and some other details. First we have data type. Numbers can be represented in the system in 3 different ways. Standard is just a regular number, the system won't change it. Percentages are stored in the database as decimal values, but displayed as whole percentages. So for example, 10% will be stored as 0.1, but displayed as the whole number 10 with a percentage sign. And the third type is currency, which will appear as whatever you have set as your local currency in the administration section. The next thing we want to establish is the aggregation type. When we're looking at a monthly measure, and we want to see the value of the last 3 months as a quarterly measure, how do we combine those numbers? Well, if we're looking at something like monthly sales, you would add up all the values, so the correct option would be sum. If we're looking at something with, say, percentages in, we wouldn't want to add these values because it might lead to a result over 100%. In this case, we would instead use average. You can specify a default decimal precision in the application, which on installation is set to 2. You can, however, specify individually on each KPI here. For your actual values and threshold values, you can choose between manual or calculated. I'll enter some values here. And now I'm finished. Once you've created a scorecard, you can use it as a template and copy and paste it to other similar scorecards. So in situations where you have, say, a first shift and a second shift, you would probably have similar measures on each, so you just copy and paste from the first shift to the second. And that's really all there is to creating organisations and scorecards. In the next lesson, we're going to show you how to do this using our tool Connect. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.